Hey, what's up, guys? John Ross here from Ross Racing. As you can see, the shop's a little bit of a mess behind me here, but that's because we're really deep into the process of assembling the race cars for the 2023 racing season. You got the B-Mod behind me, which, as you can see, the engine is in it now. And then behind me here is Patrick's Mod Lite, which we've made a lot of progress. It's got the motor in it as well, and we're just waiting on the rear end for that. But let me show you what we got going on with the motor and the B-Mod and the progress that we've made on that. So as you can see, we got the motor in between the frame rails of the B-Mod here. We even got the radiator in, some of the accessories on. We skipped a lot of steps in documenting the process of putting this thing together just because it's getting tight on being ready for the first race here in about 3 weeks. And, obviously putting the car together comes first. But I wanted to document this part of the process because it's something that's been a real kind of hot button issue in the racing community lately. You see, in B-Mod, like with any other kind of, budget restricted racing class, we're required to run flat tappet lifters, flat tappet cam setup. And there's been major issues with those in recent years as far as failing on the break-in procedure. Well, we're getting ready to do the break-in on this motor, getting it all put together and set up and ready for that process, and I wanted to document that with you guys, and we'll see how it goes. I'll show you some of the things that we do to try to ensure success. So one thing that's critical about when you're breaking in a cam is you want to get the engine up to about 2,000, 2,500 RPM and keep it there for about 20 minutes. And in the process of doing that, you don't want to have to shut the engine down for any reason. So that's why whenever we're getting ready to do a cam break-in like this, I always like to pressure test the whole cooling system and make sure there aren't any leaks. Now, we recently installed a set of water crossovers that go from the back of the intake to the front to help with cooling. So it's critical that we make sure that all of those fittings are watertight and if they won't leak under pressure once the engine gets up to temperature. So with that in mind, I'm going to fill this thing up with distilled water, and I'm going to use a radiator pressure testing kit that I rented from O'Reilly's to test the system. So we have the whole cooling system pressurized up to 20 psi right now. We actually run a 25 psi radiator cap on here, but that's about as high as this gauge on the pressure tester goes. Just looking around, so far I don't notice anything around these fittings. If there was a leak, hopefully we would see the dripping or something trickling out. And also, I checked the gauge on the pressure tester, and it seemed to be holding steady, which is a really good sign. Let's check over on this side. So we actually already kind of had everything apart on here once because we found a couple leaks, and I had to reinstall these fittings. This time, it looks like everything is holding pressure beautifully. Another thing that you want to do when you're pressure testing your coolant system is pop the valve covers and make sure that there's no water seeping up around the head bolts or studs if you're using studs. With a stock small block Chevy, all of the head bolt holes go into the water jacket, and so it's required to use thread sealant on them when you're putting them together. If you didn't get that right, didn't get the threads clean, or didn't get enough sealant on there, sometimes you'll get water start to weep up around those head bolts as the coolant system gets pressurized. But in this case, it looks like we did a good job, and there's no water there either. Another thing that I should mention here while we have the valve cover off looking for potential water leaks is these valve springs. That's a critical aspect as well of breaking in a flat tappet cam. If you have valve springs that are too stiff, you're much more likely to wipe the cam. In order to run the RPMs that we would typically turn in race trim with this motor, we run a valve spring that's approximately 130 pounds on the seat and about 340 pounds open. That's really pushing it for a flat tappet cam. That's right on the limit of what these things generally can tolerate, at least long term. With that in mind, we're running a softer spring for the break-in process. These particular springs, the way that they're set up right now, are about 90 pounds on the seat, 95-ish, and about 250 or so, 270 open. So that will give this thing a much better chance of living through its first few minutes of life and hopefully not abuse it too much. Then before we actually race the motor or turn any RPMs with it, we'll switch out to the stiffer springs. Another thing that's critical about your first startup in your break-in when running a flat tappet cam is making sure that the engine fires right up on the first few cranks. And with that in mind, setting the initial timing is critical. Now we actually run a locked out distributor in this motor, meaning that there's no timing advance curve. And normally in racing conditions, we run it at about 36 degrees of total timing. However, that can make it difficult to start the engine, especially when it's cold. So you can see the line that I drew on the distributor right here for the number 1 post. I use that to try to align the rotor as I drop the distributor in, try to set it at approximately 20 degrees. That way it should have plenty of timing to run okay, but it'll be a little bit less than normal to help it start up when it's cold. If I did that right, and once we get the carburetor on and all that side of it taken care of, hopefully this thing will fire right up. Then once we get it running, we can tweak the timing and get it back to where we're actually going to race it. So as you can see here, I'm fiddling around with the carburetor, getting that bolted onto the motor, getting the fuel lines run, throttle return spring, all that good stuff. I don't know, having a carburetor that's properly set up is another really critical aspect of making sure that your break-in goes correctly. First of all, obviously, if the carb's not set up well off the bat, the motor's not going to want to start up, and then you're going to spend a lot of time turning it over on the starter without enough oil flowing, and that can lead to a wiped cam. But also, if your carb settings are way off, you run the risk of either washing the cylinders down with too much fuel or running the thing too lean and hurting it that way. Now, ideally, you want to start, if you're going to be doing a break-in, you want to start with a carburetor that you've already had on a running motor so that you know that everything is right with it. In this case, I just finished rebuilding this carburetor, went through it and put all the parts through the ultrasonic cleaner, like you may have seen in one of the shorts that we did. So, in theory, it should all be good. I took extra care to make sure that it was all put back together the same way that it was before. Float position was the same number of turns on the idle mixture screws. And I went through and really thoroughly cleaned the thing out, even took a little piece of guitar string and went through all the tiny little passageways and whatnot. So I've got a high degree of confidence that this carb is going to be set up good and ready to go for the break-in. Now, the last thing that I did here to help try to ensure a successful break-in process might be something that you wouldn't think of, and that's actually installing mufflers in these headers before I put them on the engine. Now, you might be wondering why you would do that, especially if you're not, in a class that requires mufflers on a weekly basis. But my reasoning here is pretty simple, and that's these engines are really, really loud. And when you're trying to listen for subtle changes, with all the sound reverberating inside the garage and whatnot, trying to listen for subtle changes in, say, like a valve train noise as a lifter starts to go flat, you're probably not going to hear that over just the roar of the engine. So my thinking here was to go ahead and put these little IMCA spec mufflers that, they don't knock the sound down all that much, but hopefully enough to give me a fighting chance of hearing a problem before it becomes a bigger problem. In that case, I can shut the engine down and hopefully save myself a little bit of trouble. So I hope these have all been some helpful tips for you if you're, getting ready to do a break-in process yourself. It can certainly be a little bit intimidating, but I think these are tips that everybody can apply to try to avoid some of the pitfalls. Obviously, things like ensuring that you have good parts to start with, measuring the taper on both your camshaft lobes and the crown of your lifters is a big part of it. That's been covered in depth by a lot of other channels, so I didn't really go into that here. This is a little bit some of the more general nuts and bolts kind of stuff that'll help you have a successful first startup on your engine. So hopefully I didn't jinx myself and this all works correctly for us. We'll be doing another video on the actual break-in process itself. So stick around, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you like what we're doing here, and stick around for that next video where you're going to see this thing roar to life for the first time. Hope you all have a good one.